welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend, because it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
Thank you so much, Jess. And hello to everyone, and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Today's topic is securing the enterprise in 2024 and beyond. I want to start by saying a big thank you for joining us. On the EcoCast today, we've got some of the most innovative leading companies in the industry to talk about security in the coming year, including Zscaler, Okta, and Rubrik. I am sure I'm going to learn a lot, and I bet you will too. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Keith Ward with Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for what promises to be an incredible EcoCast today. A couple of our other amazing moderators are Jess Steinbach, who you've met, and Scott Becker. We'll be hearing from Jess again in just a minute. Now, this is my very first live event of 2024, and I am so excited to be back with you. There's snow on the ground here in Maryland, and it is brutally cold to the tune of 7 degrees with the wind chill. So it feels definitely like the new year, definitely like mid-January. So I got a question for you, and you can leave these comments in the questions box there. How cold is it where you are? Can you beat that temperature of 7 degrees? Can you get even lower? I've seen people from Pennsylvania and Utah and Denver and Iowa, Idaho, Northern Virginia, so all over the place. How cold is it where you are? I've got a colleague who was up in Canada and they beat me, but I want to find out how the rest of you are faring with the temperature. Okay. Let's see, 55 degrees. Yeah, we don't want to hear from that. 4 degrees in Wisconsin. That's good. 12 degrees in Detroit. Oh, we've got some great comments coming in. Keep those coming. Let us know what it is like outside your window, and hopefully you're inside today and not outside. So next up here, keep that working, everyone. I love these comments. Keep them going. Zurich, Switzerland, 5 degrees. Can anyone beat Switzerland? I like it. All right. So with that, let's move along. Now, the new year also means most of us are paying off our Christmas credit card debt. And we may be able to help with that today. That's because during the event, we're going to be giving away three $300 Amazon gift cards, which hopefully helps some with those bills. Unfortunately, I am not eligible to win one of those cards, so I don't get that help with any bills. And with that, everyone, why don't we dive in and get going with the meat of our event today? We start with a great introduction to today's topic by Lindsay Kay, the Vice President of Threat Intelligence for Human Security. Now, Lindsay is going to be joined by our own Jess Steinbach. So, Jess and Lindsay, you guys have the floor. Take it away.
All right. Well, Lindsay, welcome back. It is always so great to chat with you. And this is our first keynote that you and I are getting to do together of 2024.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everyone.
All right. Well, we've definitely kicked the year off on a great note because here we all are together and we've got you with us today, Lindsay. And I want to start with that kind of New Year's theme. Now, I know resolutions are cliche and we're all sick of them by now. And maybe we've even given up on many of them by now, if we even made them. But let's say that we were making a New Year's resolution for our team, for our organization. What would be the one New Year's resolution that you would suggest everyone out there in the audience make for their team this year?
Okay, cool. So in 2023, we talked a lot about using MFA, so multi-factor authentication. And while some of the weaker implementations are certainly better than not using it at all, it's certainly possible to bypass them. And we are seeing threat actors do so. So that's kind of the example that I want to cover today. So some implementations ultimately of MFA are better than others, and I'll cover that shortly. So first, I want to talk about a specific group that you all may be familiar with who's actually doing this. So Scattered Spider, a cyber criminal group known to target large companies and their contracted IT help desks, has largely used social engineering techniques in order to bypass MFA in a few different ways, according to CISA. So first and most simply, what they do is they have posed as IT staff for a company because they want to convince employees to share their MFA authentication code. So while the MFA itself is in fact working here, the threat actor actually obtained the code from the employee and then uses that to bypass the code requirement there. So next, if we kind of look at it, most of us really do use kind of our phones as our second factor of authentication in kind of the most simple version of MFA. So similar kind of to the first method that I mentioned, what Scattered Spider will do is they'll contact cellular carriers because they want to convince them to transfer the control of the targeted user's phone number to a SIM card that they control because this allows them to gain control of the phone and access to MFA prompts. So this is known as SIM swapping. So finally, what they'll do is they'll send repeated MFA notification prompts. So, when you have your phone, you use that for MFA, it kind of pops up that notification. So you see that on your phone, most of us will hit ignore, but they'll do it repeatedly. So until they get the victim to just get, I'm tired of this, and then hit accept because they want to make the notification stop. So this is what's known as MFA fatigue, and it is a pretty successful thing to get people to just make it stop. So what we want to talk about is how we address this. So you mentioned New Year's resolution that we should all have on our list. So what is a step that we can take this year because we want to reduce the effectiveness of this kind of MFA bypass technique because we want to keep our organization safer in 2024? So what I alluded to originally is that there are different types of MFA implementations. So I'm sure most of us are very familiar with the kind of most simple one where you get the code sent to your phone. However, some of these are more susceptible to things like push bombing, like I mentioned, or SIM swapping attacks, such as the ones used by Scattered Spider as the example I gave. So there are other implementations that I'm going to kind of allude to here that'll offer some additional level of resistance to these techniques as well as phishing. So one thing we should all kind of consider is moving to FIDO/WebAuthn authentication or PKI-based MFA. They are least susceptible to the types of risks that I outlined. So push bombing, SIM swapping, and phishing. And then if you kind of look at kind of that next level, it would be something like app-based authentication using OTP or a token-based OTP or mobile push notification with number matching kind of is that next layer. And then only finally, that third layer that I talked about, the least kind of secure, if you look at it that way, would be that very simple code sent to your mobile phone. So ultimately, takeaway here is while in 2023, a lot of us did implement MFA, which is a great first step. In 2024, what we should be considering is what MFA implementations we are using and look to see whether or not it's possible to select one of the stronger ones to combat the still existing threat of MFA bypass.
Okay, I'm digging it. So the New Year's resolution is MFA, MFA, MFA. Very exciting. And is this kind of, you've given us a couple of interesting ideas and places to get started. And New Year's resolution, whether we like it or lump it, it's always helpful to have that habit, that goal, right? So are there some ideas that you could give the audience for, maybe if we don't like the idea of a New Year's resolution, maybe there's some kind of low-hanging fruit, there's some easy changes that we could make that might actually have that larger impact that we're looking for. Maybe it's so simple we've even forgotten to think about it, but are there sort of some easy first steps towards our long-term New Year's resolutions? What do you think?
Yeah, so one of the things that I want to focus on is something that most people kind of consider a well-known and almost solved problem, but clearly remains pretty successful from that Scattered Spider example that I gave. So social engineering. We often gloss over it as something we understand, we know how to solve it in our organizations, but it clearly persists as a successful technique with threat actors to gain initial access. So people like Alpha affiliates, those involve Scattered Spider, like I mentioned, when they pose as those help desk or company IT staff, they are able to get credentials successfully, via phone call, SMS, or MFA codes respectively. So while we may understand this and we may have solved it at our own organization, this is something that we have very little control over the training about it or implementation or mitigative measures at third-party organization. So that may impact our own security perimeter, but we don't really have any control over it necessarily there. So I think one of the things that is, that we should focus on is, assume that this kind of thing will probably happen. Assume that, it's possible that our credentials will be leaked and used to gain access by Fed actors, potentially with the social engineering without our knowledge, and looking at it as, if we hold this to be, something that may happen, how do we reduce the risks from these credential leaks? So one kind of basic example that I like to give is network segmentation. So wide variety of benefits. It's not super, super simple to implement, but it's something that we all kind of know the benefits of. And it's something that we could definitely consider in 2024, kind of moving forward with this change to help make our organization safer.
Oh man, Lindsay, every time we come and chat, I feel like everyone walks away with some really nice key ideas and steps forward. And I love that because it is really fun to think about all the cool things coming in this year ahead. And then it's really fun to start thinking about those action steps, what we can take to get rolling and get started and start our year out on that good note with those good new habits. And so thank you very much for helping us set our resolutions and setting a good tone for 2024 ahead. It is always so much fun to chat with you. Thanks for being here with us today, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for that awesome keynote presentation, Lindsay and Jess. Great stuff. I love hearing the emphasis on multi-factor authentication. I'm actually looking at some hardware keys myself just to kind of up my security game too. So really appreciate that that awesome presentation. Before we get to our first session of the day, we now want to have a quick poll question for you about when you're going to be adding new or updating existing technology in your environment. Have you got some new projects kicking off in 2024? Let us know in that poll right now and keep those coming. A lot of you aren't sure. I'm seeing the majority right now still maybe kind of in limbo with the start of the new year. Things are kind of being reset. So I definitely get that. But keep voting. Keep answering that poll. And we've got another minute or so to vote before we get going with our inaugural presentation in this event today. So once again, thank you so much for voting, letting us know this kind of information is very important to us and to our vendors, our sponsors. So everybody wins. Once again, thank you for voting in that. And I am going to move on and we are going to go into our first session now. This comes from Zscaler, and presenting for Zscaler today is Jacob Serpa. He's the Senior Portfolio Manager. Jacob, welcome. It is so great to have you here today for my first event of 2024. And I'm going to turn things over to you right now. You have the mic, sir.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for that introduction. And hello, everyone. It's good to be with you here today. So again, I'm Jacob. And the topic for this talk is future-proof your security architecture with zero trust. Now, hopefully that's straightforward enough that we can just jump into it without too much preamble here. So yesterday's architectures are poor fits for the modern world. And when I say yesterday's architectures, I'm referring to perimeter-based architectures. So think hub and spoke networks secured by castle moat security models, built on tools like firewalls and VPNs. So these are things that we're all, I think, quite familiar with. But to understand why yesterday's architectures are poor fits for today, we need to think about the world of yesterday for which those architectures were actually designed. So you can see a diagram here that illustrates this perimeter-based architecture. And let's just start off by imagining a company back in the era of the on-premises only world. And when this company first starts up, they're going to have this one location with the affixed data center. And this is their HQ. Their employees come to that office every single day to do their jobs. And they're accessing applications that are inside of that data center every day to do their jobs. And so it made sense in this kind of a setup that, we looked around and we saw our network that we had built where we had our users and they were accessing these applications. And we said, hey, we need to secure our organization, and probably the best thing we can do for threat and data protection is to secure this network. And so, it made some sense to build a perimeter using tools like firewalls and VPNs and these kinds of things so that you could keep the bad things out and the good things in. But even back then, when you had this kind of an architecture, as your organization started to grow, it started to create some problems. Because as you started a new branch site or built a new factory or had some other kind of remote office, all of those new locations were beholden to the network and to the data center, because all of your apps were in your data center, all of your security appliances were in the data center, and you had to extend that network to these new locations in order that everything can function and be safe. Now, fast forward to today. It's not just a few locations that you're extending the network to. Rather, you're extending the network to hundreds, thousands, maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of users. So basically, offices of one person. And that means you're extending the network far more than you used to, because these people need access to the network to do their jobs, just like in the old days. Similarly, the tools that users are accessing day in, day out, on average, are cloud applications, SaaS applications, things like Salesforce, Office 365. And so you now have to extend the network to those cloud resources as well. And so very quickly, you get this network that is just massive and sprawling as it connects to all these different locations, users, and devices. And the organization is having to build a bigger and bigger moat, so to speak, around this network in order to try to stay secure. This approach is really complicated. It's really rigid. It impedes transformation. And most importantly, perhaps when it comes to security architectures, it increases risk. And so I want to give an analogy for a moment about one of the key ways that a perimeter-based architecture will increase risk. So imagine you have an office, and anybody can find this office. They can, Google map it. They can show up at your front door, and they may or may not be carded at the door. You may have security guarding the entrance, but once they're inside of your office, they can move from any room to any room. They're allowed to go about unescorted and access whatever they want without any kind of additional security measures in place. And so obviously, that's a really big risk. They can go put their hands on any machine, any device, any desk or office. That's a big problem. This is a great analogy for understanding lateral threat movement. And on a perimeter-based architecture, when someone gets onto the network, once they have successfully passed that moat, so to speak, and gotten into your castle, it's easy for them to move laterally across all of these connected resources that are this, complex web of connections that compose the network. And so that's the idea of lateral threat movement. And it's one of the key ways that perimeter-based architectures increase risk. But it's only one of the key ways. There are actually 4 different ways that perimeter-based architectures increase risk. And I'll talk through those one at a time here. So first of all, once again, imagine that you have this organization in this era of on-premises only. And it's one location, got the apps, the users, everything is in that one location. But over time, they grow and they start to have a branch site. They build a factory. Maybe they spin up some cloud workloads in AWS or Azure, and maybe they start using some virtual appliances from a security perspective. Well, it starts to get a little bit more complex. And as they continue to grow, it continues to get more complex. They spin up additional cloud workloads. They also now have remote users that are having to VPN in and connect to the network in order to access the resources they're in and do their jobs. And so this network continues to expand, continues to balloon, and all of these different entry points into the network represent attractive attack vectors for cyber criminals. And so the more you extend your network, the more you are expanding your attack surface. But it's a little bit worse than that, actually, because tools like firewalls and VPNs, which are the go-to way of trying to build that moat and secure this network, are also going to increase your attack surface. That's because they have public IP addresses. This is by design so that your authorized users can, find those doors into your network on the internet and access the network and then do their jobs. But the bad guys can also find public IP addresses. And so As you're extending your network, you're expanding your attack surface. As you're securing your network with tools like firewalls and VPNs, regrettably, you're still expanding your attack surface. And so it makes it easier for the bad guys to find you. Second, this approach makes it easier for the bad guys to compromise you, because once they find an entry point into your network, they then want to breach your defenses and make it into the network. And that's what we mean by compromise. Now, if you want to stop compromise, you need to be able to inspect all of the traffic across your organization in real time and enforce real-time policies to stop threats as they're coming in. Now, if you want to inspect all of your traffic, that inevitably means inspecting your encrypted traffic, because actually upwards of 95% of web traffic today is encrypted. But there's a problem here. And that is that it's quite difficult to inspect all of your encrypted traffic at scale, particularly as your organization grows. The reason for that is that it's a compute-heavy endeavor to inspect encrypted traffic. It's a resource-intensive process. And perimeter-based architectures are ultimately appliance-based architectures, whether those are hardware appliances or virtual appliances. And that means these appliances have a fixed capacity to handle a certain volume of traffic, to give a certain amount of computing power, to process a certain number of users. However you'd like to say it, they have limited scalability and they can't ramp up indefinitely to inspect all of your encrypted traffic, particularly as your organization grows. And sadly, the cyber criminals know this, and that's why they tend to hide their threats inside of encrypted traffic so that they can bypass defenses, pass through, and make it into your environment. That brings us to step 3 here, which is one I already gave an illustration for, so I won't belabor the point. But once they get into your network and past your moat, they can move from resource to resource, app to app, and access various things connected to that network. And they're probably going to drop additional threats off on their way, and at the same time, scour that network for sensitive information. And that's where we come to the last step. They steal your data. Because once they find that sensitive information, they are then going to try to exfiltrate it, typically via the web, and once again, typically via encrypted traffic. And as I already mentioned, inspecting that encrypted traffic is a compute-heavy endeavor. Appliances of whatever form factor have a hard time doing it and scaling up indefinitely as organizations grow. And so these are the 4 key ways that perimeter-based architectures are going to increase risk for the organization. But it's not just risk, as you can see along the bottom there. It's also going to increase complexity, cost. It's going to harm user experience. It's going to harm productivity and a variety of other things. So when we're thinking about digital transformation and we're looking at these perimeter-based architectures built on firewalls and a very network-centric kind of approach, it becomes pretty apparent that they're not designed for the world of today, like we already said. And so if you want to undergo digital transformation and do it in a way that is successful, dynamic, efficient, and also, and of primary importance, secure, you need a different kind of architecture. And that is where zero trust comes into the picture. Because it's a heavily diluted term, yes, but despite that, zero trust is not just some additional tool to throw into your environment. It's not some new appliance that you stick in your data center and, voila, you have zero trust. It is, again, a fundamentally different architecture. It is a different way of doing things. And so when you have a zero trust architecture, you're going to have a global zero trust cloud that is delivering zero trust security as a service at the edge from as close to the end user as possible. And that security cloud is going to be acting as an intelligent switchboard, to borrow an analogy from yesteryear. So this intelligent switchboard is securely connecting any one thing to any other one thing. So any to any user accessing any app, any workload accessing any workload, whatever the case may be. And so this means that rather than putting people on the network as a whole, you're connecting them one at a time directly to the apps that are appropriate for them to access. You are no longer beholden to the network. The network is just transport, it's just piping, and business policies determine who can access what over any network. This approach is far more simple, it's more streamlined, it's more agile, it's more conducive to transformation. And once again, for a security architecture, what is of primary importance, it's more secure. So how does zero trust work? Well, here's a diagram that is Zscaler specific, but I think it illustrates the way this architecture works quite well. So along the bottom, you have the various entities that are going to need access to resources in your organization. You see users, apps and workloads, IoT and OT devices, as well as B2B partners. Then at the top, you can see the resources that they might be accessing. Some are managed by others. You can think the internet, websites, SaaS applications, like, again, Office 365, Salesforce, Box, Workday, etc. But some are going to be managed by you. These are your private apps that you build and you maintain, whether they are deployed in your data center or in some kind of IaaS or PaaS instance like AWS or Azure. And then in the middle, you can see this policy enforcement point, this global security cloud that is going to be acting as an intelligent switchboard to securely connect anything to anything one-to-one. So how does it look when someone attempts access? Well, with traffic flowing through this global security cloud, the first thing that's going to happen when someone attempts to access something is this cloud is going to say, stop, who are you? It's going to verify identity. Are you Bob in accounting? Are you an IoT device in one of our factories? What is the identity? Then it's going to say, okay, I see who you are, but where are you going? What is it that you're trying to access? And then it does something really important. It says, what's the risk? And this needs to be done in an adaptive, continuous fashion that looks at the context of access. You might hear this slogan sometimes, context is the new perimeter. And the reason for that is identity alone is not enough to determine if someone should be given access to a specific resource. And that's because identities can be stolen. People lose their credentials all the time. And so you need to look at the context of access in order to determine risk to see who should or should not be given access to a given resource. And this is something that is inevitably going to involve AI as you're trying to, quickly consider a lot of information automatically in order to inform this policy decision. And there are 4 key contexts that you can look at, or rather that you want your zero trust platform to look at as it attempts to determine risk. And so the first one is user risk. You'll see behavior with UEBA in parentheses there. That's user and entity behavioral analytics. And basically the idea here is, what's the user doing? Is it suspicious? Is it unusual? Does it look threatening? What's going on? Now, similarly, you have device risk that needs to be looked at. First of all, what's the type? Is it a managed corporate laptop or a personal mobile phone belonging to an employee? Those will obviously be handled quite differently, I would suspect. You also have posture. What is the posture of the endpoint? Does it have the latest patches and updates for the operating system? What about for the security solutions deployed on that endpoint? Now, third is destination and content risk. And you see TLS inspection there, which is just referring to encrypted traffic inspection. Because if you want to know the destination and know the content that is being handled, you need to be able to inspect that encrypted traffic, look inside of the connection, and see what's going on. As we already talked about, you need scale to do that. And so that's part of the reason you want this global security cloud that is designed to scale for the world's largest organizations. Because if it can inspect that encrypted traffic, then it can see if users are going to a threatening destination, handling threatening content, or perhaps handling sensitive information that they are at risk of leaking. And then fourth, there is third-party intel. This is important because you have a variety of technologies and solutions in your organization that are doing a great job, provide great intel, and that needs to inform context. That needs to be used by the Zero Trust platform to determine what the risk is and to use that to enforce policy. And that brings us to the last part here, which is, what's the decision? Go or no go? Do they get access or don't they? This needs to be done on a per session basis. No one should be getting blanket access to the network or to all the resources therein. Rather, for each attempted access, this process needs to be followed by the Zero Trust platform. And if it's determined they should have access, say to some SaaS app like Office 365, their traffic gets passed along. Or maybe they're accessing some private app and they should get access to that. Well, then once again, their traffic gets passed along. Now, the astute observer at this point is going to recognize these arrows are pointing in different directions. And there's a reason for that. For your private applications, you don't want to allow inbound connections. You don't want to have public IP addresses that serve as targets for the bad guys. And so you want to use this inside out connection, as it's called, where you have this piece of software sitting on the app side that reaches out to the Zero Trust cloud, which then stitches the connections together and allows the user to access the private app. But all of this is done invisibly to the end user. And when you have this kind of inside out connection, it's going to minimize your attack surface. You have no inbound connections. You have no public IP addresses in front of those apps. Your apps are invisible, hidden behind the cloud, and that's going to help you minimize the attack surface. And this is further enhanced, this benefit, because you're going to be able to eliminate tools like firewalls and VPNs, which have those public IP addresses that are targets for the bad guys. Now, as we move down the list there, you see prevents lateral movement. Because policy is enforced on a per session basis and people are connected to apps rather than the network, they can't move laterally between connected applications. And then you can stop cyber attacks and data loss. This has to do with a couple of those steps on that list of ways that perimeter-based architectures increase risk for organizations. You can stop compromise and you can stop the theft of your sensitive information. Because again, if you have full inspection of encrypted traffic powered by the cloud, you're able to look at the context inside of every connection and determine the risk to see if there are threats or data loss in real time and then stop those. And so this is what's happening with a zero trust architecture. And if we return to our illustration that we had previously, remember that under a perimeter-based architecture, you have this firewall-centric perimeter-based architecture that's like letting an unescorted visitor roam around your office. Obviously, there's a lot of threat of lateral movement and a whole bunch of other stuff there. But when you have a zero trust architecture, it's a lot different. It's like having your building having a hidden location. Nobody can find it online because you have this non-existent attack surface. Once the user is invited to your office, they can come to the office, but then at the door, they're going to be carded. Their identity is going to be checked. Their belongings are going to be inspected for threats, and then they will be blindfolded and escorted to the specific room where they are having their meeting. At the end of that meeting, they're escorted back out. Their belongings are inspected again to see if they're trying to take anything with them. The blindfold is removed, and then they're allowed to go on their way. So again, this architecture is fundamentally different from the way of doing things that we had in the past. And that's what Zscaler is all about, giving zero trust architecture to our customers. Our mission is to secure, simplify, and transform businesses. And that's not just marketing fluff. These are benefits that our customers tell us they receive day in and day out. They're able to reduce business risk, to eliminate cost and complexity, and to increase business agility with the power of the Zero Trust Exchange. And that is our platform, that's our cloud that we use to give customers zero trust architecture. And so a few key things to keep in mind here as I wrap up. First of all, if you're going to be giving all of your traffic and allowing it to flow through someone's cloud and they're going to be trusted with your security, you want to make sure that you can actually trust them, that they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And so you need to have a strong public company, and that's what Zscaler is. We have 2 billion in ARR, and that's why, in large part, we're trusted by over 40% of the Fortune 500 for security, and we've secured over 40 million users. We love to delight our customers. That's why our Net Promoter Score is over 70, while the SaaS average is 30, and we're the technology leader. We have the world's largest inline security cloud. We've been doing this for years. We process over 300 billion daily transactions, which is 20 times the number of daily Google searches. And we've been a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, first for Secure Web Gateway, and then as that evolved into SSE, and that's been going on for about 12 years now. So what I leave you with here is if you want to secure your enterprise in 2024 and beyond and have this future-proofed architecture, you got to take a look at Zero Trust. And if you're taking a look at Zero Trust architecture, then I also strongly encourage you to take a long, hard look at Zscaler, because we help organizations do this every day, secure, simplify, and transform themselves, and we would love to help you as well. So with that, thank you so much, and happy to pivot to some questions now.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacob, for that great presentation. I think what really stuck with me was your phrase about that context is the new perimeter. And that makes so much sense when I think about the perimeter is essentially global, right? Yeah. So essentially there is no perimeter. So you just take it on a case by case basis. To me, that makes so much sense. So yeah, we do have some great questions coming in, and let's dive in. We have time for a few of them here. So Forrest wants to know, so with zero trust architecture, is there any need any longer for on-premises firewalls and I guess other controls?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, I would want to say that we do have customers that come to us and say, we want to get rid of our firewalls. We want to, just use Zscaler and have zero trust architecture for everything. That does happen. But typically it's going to be more of a phased approach. And there are customers who come to us and rather than just, wholesale embrace zero trust and get rid of all their firewalls, all their on-premises stuff, they like to have things running in parallel initially. But what happens typically is over time, they see that they don't need a lot of that stuff. And so they continue to put more and more eggs in the basket of zero trust, so to speak. So you can continue using your on-prem firewalls, certainly go for it, but it is not required. And our customers very often do decrease their dependence on those kinds of tools over time as they're embracing zero trust. So hopefully that helps.
It sure does. And I'll tell you what, in the meantime, I'm going to put up the poll question while we go through some more questions. Let Zscaler know now what additional information you would like. That poll is up, so please vote in it. They have operators standing by, as they used to say on the old TV shows, and they would love to hear from you. So please vote in this poll while we go through a couple of more questions here. So here's another question for you, Jacob. You mentioned cost savings on a slide, but didn't go in depth in that. So how does zero trust help with costs? Or in fact, does it even ultimately help with costs, or is it more of a cost center, would you say?
That's a great question. And I'm happy to answer it because talking about the economic value of zero trust was actually a big part of my job for quite some time. So there are 6 key ways that you can cut costs and save money when you embrace a zero trust architecture. So I'll try to give an abbreviated response here because it can get a little bit long. But 6 key ways, 6 key things. First of all, you're able to optimize technology costs by cutting out point products, by not having to purchase all these individual tools and removing your appliances and not having to deploy additional appliances because this is a cloud delivered service. So you're able to reduce those costs and also shift from a rigid CapEx model to a more, we'll say, flexible OpEx kind of model of consumption. Second, as you are streamlining your environment, your appliances, going this direct to app connectivity route, it's going to simplify things. You're able to reduce complexity. You're able to increase operational efficiency, and that's going to save time for your administrators and cut down on overhead. Third is accelerating M&A time to value. If your organization is in a space where you do mergers or acquisitions, you know that it's easy for the network integration process to have scope creep and to get delayed, and for it to take more time and more resources than you originally anticipated to get that integration done. And so with zero trust architecture, you don't have to do network integration because you don't have to put people on the network to get access to the resources in the network. You just add new user groups, add new apps, and bada bing, bada boom, there you go. Fourth is security posture. With a better security posture, you're able to avoid the costs of breaches, which can include fines, fees, regulatory penalties, remediation costs, customer churn, all that kind of stuff. Fifth would be enhanced productivity. You're able to give a better user experience to your employees and reduce wasted time so that they can be more productive. And then last but not least, you have minimize your carbon footprint, where you have this highly efficient multi-tenant cloud that's going to require less power consumption. And you're going to be able to, again, eliminate appliances in your environment that are going to be consuming a lot of electricity. So you can save on your power bill as well. So quite a few ways there. That's as quick of a version as I can give on that. You can find more information on our website.
I believe that's what's known as a win-win, Jacob. So you save money and you get more secure at the same time. How often does that happen in life? Well, so we are now out of time for questions. There's a ton of them coming in, and I'm sure Zscaler will be following up with people. But I do have one more quick one for you before I let you go. You've whet a lot of appetites based on what I'm seeing here in the chat. So if somebody wants to get started with Zscaler or find out more, Jacob, what is the next step they should take?
Yeah, so you can go to zscaler.com and we have a bunch of resources there. One thing in particular that I would suggest is looking at our Intro to Zero Trust webinars. It's just a great starting point if you're looking to learn more about Zero Trust. We designed it to be very entry level so that anybody can come check it out. So that's what I would say would be a great next step.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks again, Jacob, for your presentation, for your insights in the Q&A. It's been a real delight to have you on. So have a great day.
Thank you, and likewise.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. I also want to remind everyone you've got a little bit more time to check out the handouts. We've got a link to a great white paper from Zscaler on the history of Zero Trust. That looks like something that I am going to be checking out as well. Those links are in the handout section right next to that questions tab. So make sure you go there. And thanks to everyone who responded to the poll. We appreciate that feedback. And now it is time to give away the first prize of the new year for me. This is one of the things I look forward to most. And the winner of this $300 Amazon gift card is John Huff from Texas. Congratulations to you, John. We will get back to you ASAP about getting your card. And now as Zscaler exits the stage, we are ready for our next presentation. And getting on the stage right now is Okta. And presenting for Okta today is Isla Shard, Director of Product Solutions Marketing. They are ready to go right now. So, Isla, the ball is in your court.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar on protecting your organizations from identity-based attacks. Today's session will be pretty quick, but hopefully really impactful, where I'll be sharing the 5 most common identity-based attacks and how you can respond to them. So with that, let's get started. Today's digital world is full of cyber attacks making headlines every other day, but it's not the networks and applications that are being targeted here. It's the users, the employees, the customers, contractors, and partners. And whether it's the use of stolen credentials, privilege misuse, social engineering like phishing, or even just an error, people continue to play an overwhelming role in data breaches. And Verizon's latest DBIR report showed that people were either partially or fully responsible for about 3/4 of reported data breaches. And this is not limited to any particular segment or cohort. This is a scale issue for companies, as every individual that's connecting to your resources, whether it be your employee or your customer or your partner, is really a potential target for a cyber attack. And part of the challenge in securing the human element of our organization is that people tend to choose convenience over security and privacy. It really is just how we're wired. And I think it's a safe bet that there is maybe a handful of you here today that either know someone who reuses a password or maybe even reuses a password themselves. Or maybe you used to use a password for an account over and over again for an account that you created years ago, just never went in and updated it with something unique. And it's become nearly impossible for users to keep a unique password for the plethora of services that they have online today. Now, passwords are strongest when they're completely random and not guessable. But we're not wired to remember random strings of numbers and letters, and we are wired to choose the path of least resistance. So people end up reusing their passwords. And to make matters worse, security policies that require a high degree of complexity and forced rotation tends to cause people to revert to patterns to select their passwords. Think winter 2023 or Jan 2024 with an exclamation mark. While these might meet our security policy requirements, they are easily guessable and not really helping secure our organizations. As many employees continue to work remotely, sometimes using their own personal devices, enforcing these security standards has just become even harder. Now, for example, a greater reliance on digital modes of communication can make employees more vulnerable to social engineering attacks like phishing, which introducing more restrictive and inconvenient security policies can result in employees circumventing or ignoring them. And that leaves organizations continuing to fight the decades-long battle between balancing convenience with privacy and security. And the attack landscape is growing in terms of both volume and impact. Motivations and costs for identity-based attacks are the same as all cybersecurity attacks. Adversaries overwhelmingly want financial gain, with 95% of breaches having this as a goal. And it includes extracting a ransom, stealing credit card numbers, or identities to sell on the dark web. Another motivation is espionage, either from a nation state or other threat actors looking to steal sensitive data. And lastly, malicious attacks could be from hackers looking to cause havoc for a number of different reasons. And it could be something as simple as a disgruntled former customer or an employee with a grudge. And these costs for a data breach are continuing to grow. Ultimately, the cost can depend on the system and user accounts that have been breached, but can typically consist of financial losses due to fraud, cost of remediation, increased operational costs, loss of revenue, legal expenditures and regulatory fines, even loss of customers because of lack of trust, or trouble in attracting new business due to ongoing brand damage. And according to the 2023 cost of a data breach report, the average cost has risen to $4.4 million. And it becomes even more expensive when identity is a factor. A data breach initiated by stolen credentials had an average of $4.62 million, while data breaches caused by phishing cost an average of $4.75 million. Now, diving into the 5 most common identity attacks against users to understand what they are, why they work, and how you can secure your organization from them. The first attack that we're going to look at today is called password spray. Password spray is a type of brute force attack, basically trial and error guessing at its best. An attacker will use a list of common passwords to attempt to gain access to many user accounts within a system. These user account lists may be known ahead of time or purely guessed based on other information. And this is successful because there's a tendency to pick simple passwords or not change default passwords for systems. Malicious attackers can exploit this tendency and use bots to automate and scale, making the attack much more efficient and covering much more ground than could reasonably be done manually. And because attackers are quote-unquote spraying multiple accounts, they're improving their chances of success while minimizing the likelihood of getting locked out of accounts due to too many wrong attempts. And here it's purely a numbers game. The end result is access to a user's account on a system. And it really only takes a single compromised account for attackers to be able to gain access, move laterally, install programs such as remote monitoring software, or access sensitive resources. And in last year, 2023, a nation state successfully used password spray to compromise organizations in the defense and pharmaceutical industries using the attack Peach Sandstorm. Now, due to the nature of this attack, anyone in the organization can be a target. The attacker is mainly just looking for a foothold into the organization's systems, or they're attempting to verify username and password pairs to sell to other attackers. Now, let's talk about another type of brute force attack, credential stuffing. Credential stuffing is like password spray in that attackers are attempting to log in with lots of accounts using bots and automation. The key difference here is that with credential stuffing, the attacker is using compromised username and password pairs that were sourced from breaches in other services and stuffing them into a new service. Because of the unfortunate reality where we hear about new breaches frequently, this also means that each breach causes a potential attacker's list to grow. Now, credential stuffing exploits the tendency for users to reuse passwords across services like we talked about earlier. And because of this, the target really can be anyone in the organization. If they've reused their credentials from other services, they're a target. You can see here that credential stuffing makes a large portion of authentication traffic, which is a frightening statistic, showing just how common this attack pattern is. Now let's shift gears away from brute force to another category of attack, phishing. And you're probably familiar with phishing to some degree or another, so bear with me here. Phishing is a type of social engineering attack to steal user data like login credentials, credit card numbers, or other sensitive information. In the context of identity, it usually results in a compromised credential, allowing the attacker to gain access as that user to a corporate system or network. With phishing, it's all about the attacker tricking the victim into taking the bait and doing something harmful, like clicking a malicious link. Phishing campaigns can take many forms, and a couple of examples include emails, SMS, which is also called smishing, or voice, which is called vishing. Campaigns can broadly target an organization or specific targets within an organization, commonly known as spear phishing. And whaling is a phishing attack that targets high-profile users, which includes members of the C-suite. To get users to fall victim to a phish, attackers will come up with any number of pretexts or calls to action that will play on a user's emotions to get them to take the bait. The more targeted the campaign, the more personal details the attacker will use to make the phish more believable. And the majority of these attacks do still use email as the attack vector. But regardless of the method, once a user falls victim and has their credentials stolen, the attacker can then gain access to the system and access sensitive information. Now, MFA adoption has grown dramatically since the early days of the pandemic due to so many people having to shift to remote work. In February of 2020, only 35% of Okta workforce users used MFA. And in just 1 month, adoption was then at 50%. By January of 2023, MFA adoption climbed to 64%, with 90% of admin accounts using MFA. Now, this is great news, but the downside is that these numbers are unique to Okta, which is noted way above industry averages for MFA adoption. And this just means there's a lot of organizations exposed and vulnerable out in the world still. While MFA adoption does reduce the risk of some brute force and social engineering attacks, the bad news is that MFA does not guarantee that identity theft will not happen. In push notification abuse, attackers take advantage of a weakness in the authentication method, push MFA. In the normal case, this method will push a notification to a user's device, such as a smartphone or a tablet, and require them to accept it in order to pass the authentication check. This means that the user can approve an authentication prompt for a login that they didn't start or aren't even present for. And this is the exact issue with this method and why this type of attack is successful. The attacker doesn't even need to have the user's device. They just need to trick the user into accepting a prompt. And MFA fatigue falls into the category of push notification abuse. A bad actor can exploit push MFA to repeatedly send notifications to an end user with the goal of flooding notifications to get the user into accepting the prompt purely because they're just frustrated or exhausted from having to continuously hit yes or accept. And in either case, the result is the same. The bad actor gets authenticated as the user. These attacks are often preceded by other social engineering attack vectors, such as phishing, to gain credentials. And in some cases, attackers may combine this attack with social engineering tactics, such as trying to contact the user out of band, posing as IT or technical support, and getting them to approve the prompt. And this is how a popular ride-sharing app was recently compromised. Now, session hijacking is a broad category of attacks that steal session tokens to take over a session and impersonate a valid user. Because attack toolkits are becoming increasingly more available, this type of attack is on the rise. And since it occurs after a user has authenticated, traditional authentication methods, including MFA, don't do much in terms of protection. The ways in which a session token can be stolen include adversary-in-the-middle attacks, which is formerly known as man-in-the-middle. These attacks are really started from a successful phish, leading a user to a login page or a screen that's in the control of the attacker. Any information entered is intercepted by the attacker and then proxied to the real website. And more sophisticated versions of this type of attack leave users completely unaware that they've even been compromised and gives the attacker an active session as the user. Cross-site scripting is an attacker will put malicious code onto a web page, which is then used to steal the session token. There's session sniffing, where an attacker may gain access to a user's network traffic through unsecured Wi-Fi and search for sessions and cookies. And then, of course, there's malware, where an attacker will infect the user's computer with malware, which either captures the session token or performs actions that were not authorized by the user. Session hijacking gives an attacker a foothold into the organization in order to do things like move laterally, escalate privilege to gain access to higher value targets, steal PII, and so much more. But now that we've looked at the different types of attacks, let's look at how to protect against them. Protecting against identity attacks breaks down into two general categories. There's the technical control, and then there's user education. From a technical control standpoint, we want to address the weaknesses that are exploited by various attacks that we spoke about. For example, improving password hygiene, moving towards more secure forms of authentication, and proactively protecting against threats. Most of you have already done this, but if you haven't, implementing single sign-on introduces centralized policy and visibility for our users, making things easier for both users and IT. SSO enables you to centralize access policies, making it easier to create and enforce strong policies across all of your resources for all of your users. And centralized visibility also makes it easier to detect identity anomalies versus policing each of the dozens and dozens of applications and sign-on events in your environment. And once you have SSO, it's easier to implement password requirements across all users. These requirements make it more difficult for attackers. And simple things like disallowing default passwords and requiring an immediate change for new accounts are controls that help prevent brute force attacks. Enforcing strong passwords and reducing the number of times an attacker can attempt to guess a password for an account. Using technologies like Okta's Threat Insights and CAPTCHA can stop automated attacks in their track by blocking bot-like and anomalous behavior intelligently without disrupting the user. And deploying not just multi-factor authentication, but phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication can halt brute force, phishing, and man-in-the-middle attacks in their tracks. Unlike traditional MFA, these technologies use strong cryptography and domain binding to ensure that users are logging into the appropriate site. And they can't be used on man-in-the-middle login pages to authenticate a user and won't work for the attacker. And these types of attacks become ineffective when using these types of authentication methods. And in that second category, education is critical to empowering users to become a powerful line of defense against identity attacks. Critically, warning against password reuse, encouraging good password hygiene like a long, unique passphrase that doesn't need to be rotated unless it's suspected to have been compromised, and helping users identify not just how to spot something suspicious, but also how to report it, are all tools to building a successful program. Consider implementing a passwordless authentication environment. Passwords are a significant attack vector. With 86% of web application breaches involving stolen credentials, password authentication can use a number of technology options to validate passwordless authentication can use a number of technology options to validate users with a high degree of assurance. When no passwords are there to remember or steal, you're eliminating a source of frustration for both your users as well as a significant vulnerability. And finally, consider automating the identity lifecycle. Connecting with HR systems to automatically provision, but also deprovision users based on their job role helps create a consistent approach to access that is faster and less error-prone than manual steps. It also reduces the risk of attackers taking advantage of orphan accounts. And these orphan accounts are not monitored and may not be using the latest user authentication, which means they are even more vulnerable. Now, we've covered hardening against identity-based attacks, but what can we do to detect an attack that's in progress? And more importantly, how do we respond to it? First and foremost, your access management solution should have awareness of what's happening in your environment and be able to adapt to changing context. Identity integrates to many, many different kinds of technology within your organization. So it can detect things like impossible travel. For example, a user attempting to log in 1,000 miles from where they were just logged in about 5 minutes ago. Or maybe logging in from a place that they've never even been before. Identity can also detect a new device or when something looks off, such as many multiple password attempts. And the next step is to take action. For example, denying the authentication attempt or requiring a stronger form of authentication. It's policy like this that allows you to ratchet up your security posture when you need it while not impacting user experience when you don't. And it allows you to dynamically respond to these various anomalous conditions. Sending notifications to users about unusual events and, more critically, taking action when suspicious activity is reported allows you to turn your users into a powerful weapon against cyber attacks. And setting up automations to detect attacks like push notification abuse or other suspicious activity and automatically responding is another powerful tool that can stop identity attackers in their tracks. Examples of automatic responses include notifying your SOC about suspicious activity, suspending accounts, terminating sessions, forcing password resets, or placing users into a high-risk group which denies access to highly sensitive applications. And integrating identity with your existing security tools makes it easier to assess risk continuously before, during, or after authentication, making it easier and faster to detect, remediate, and take action. Now, I do want to take a moment to take a holistic look at all of the different capabilities that Okta provides in a single platform to help your organization protect, detect, and respond to these identity-based attacks throughout your entire user lifecycle. Okta Threat Insights helps protect your organization against anomalous activity and automated attacks such as password spray, credential stuffing, or other brute force attacks, insulating your users from lockouts or other negative downstream effects. It aggregates data across the Okta customer base and uses it to detect credential-based attacks. Okta prevents these attacks from getting into the authentication stage, reducing the risk of valid users being locked out of their accounts. Universal Directory and Single Sign-On gives you a holistic view of your users and centralized control over authentication policy and methods. And Okta Device Access extends that same secure MFA experience to how users sign in to their desktops, extending an extra level of protection to their devices. And Device Access can confirm a user's identity and grant access without even an internet connection. And with Okta, you can choose which authentication methods you want to use. We support a range of secure MFA, including adaptive MFA. Okta's adaptive MFA behavior detection analyzes users' behavior patterns and creates profiles of typical patterns based on previous activity. You can configure policy rule that responds automatically to changes in user behavior, for example, requiring an additional factor if a user attempts to sign in from a different country or a different IP address. And Okta supports all major phishing-resistant authentication methods, including any FIDO2 WebAuthn options and PIV-CAC smart cards. Okta FastPass is a phishing-resistant, passwordless, zero-trust authenticator, suitable for managed and unmanaged devices. It not only resists phishing, but performs device checks and can deny authentication if the device does not meet access policies, like having an up-to-date OS version installed. FastPass can perform device checks in the background every single time a user opens up a new application. Organizations are implementing least privilege access to resources as part of their overall zero trust strategy, and that ensures users are giving only the minimum levels of permissions needed to do their jobs. Okta Identity Governance capabilities can inform risk-based cybersecurity programs by implementing fine-grained least privilege access controls consistently throughout your users and resources. An adaptive policy allows you to take risk into account and access decisions. You can look at a variety of signals for every authentication and provide a seamless experience to users where there's low risk and ratchet up security if something looks off. Workflows is an easy-to-use automation tool that provides a powerful way to automate detection and response to various attacks. And Okta Identity Threat Protection with Okta AI integrates identity-focused signals from your existing security tools, including your email security vendors, your SIEMs, your XDR provider, and more. It aggregates and correlates identity data with other logs in the IT environment and performs real-time risk assessments. Security teams can use this enriched data to instantly spot anomalous behavior throughout your user sessions. Identity threat protection also adapts to changing session risk and orchestrates tailored responses like logging users out of supported applications, sending notifications to your incident response team, or triggering reauthentication. Okta also offers a real-time syslog that IT teams can use to troubleshoot and address security issues immediately. And these pre-built reports can help admins detect potential security risks. All of this is part of the Workforce Identity Cloud, a unified platform that will combine identity and access management, privileged access management, and identity governance under a single platform. And I'd like to leave you with this thought. It's been said for a while that identity is the new perimeter, but identity's role doesn't stop when a user or an account is authenticated. Identity needs to constantly change and adapt to this new modern business environment and the adversaries hoping to exploit it. Identity is really the only technology that can connect to everything in your organization and tie them together. Your users, their devices, your applications, your security tools and technologies. And this means that identity is also a prime target for attackers. Identities should work with your existing security tools to amplify their signals so that you can find and stop tomorrow's attacks sooner. And if you want to see how Okta can help elevate your security posture against identity-based threats, I encourage you to visit okta.com/free trial to test it out for yourself. Thank you so much for joining the session today, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Isla. Great stuff there. I love seeing how cyber attacks are changing and what we all have to do to keep up. The identity-based attacks are just coming hot and heavy these days. So time for another poll question. Let us know what additional resources you'd like to see from Okta. Looks like we had a lot of questions that we can't get to right here. Their session was just so full, but never fear. The Okta team will do their level best to respond to all the questions that came in. I also want to remind all of you about the handouts, and we've got a link from Okta to a white paper that has an analysis of identity-based attacks related to what was being discussed today. Be sure to check that out for more detail. Those handouts, like all of our handouts, are absolutely free, so get them while they're hot. Thanks to everyone who's responding to the poll. We appreciate your feedback, as we always do, and I'm going to leave it up here for another moment, and then we are going to get started on the next thing. But first, before we do that, it is time to give away another $300 Amazon gift card. And the winner of the latest gift card for this event is Zulin Kalathia from New Jersey. I hope I pronounced that properly. I think it is Zulin Kalathia from New Jersey. Congratulations to you, Zulin. We will be in touch about getting you your prize. So well done. And now, everyone, we are moving on to our last presentation of this event. Dropping knowledge on us next is Rubrik, and Veer Choksi, the Senior Product Marketing Manager, is presenting for Rubrik today. Veer, you know what to do, so the mic is all yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Veer Choksi. I've been with Rubrik for a little bit over 2 years. Now, in my role, I get to speak with both IT and security professionals. I imagine that this audience skews a little bit more towards the security side, and in many organizations, these functions are fairly siloed. So my goal with this presentation is to bring you all a little bit into the world of IT and backup, and to explain how enterprise backup and recovery belongs in the cybersecurity conversation and is a really vital component of cyber resilience. So we're going to talk about a newish flavor of security called data security. We're going to talk about why recoverability is a key part of cyber resilience. I'm going to spend some time talking about why backup matters and what you can get out of your backups. And then I'm going to end with a few final thoughts. So backup was really built for disaster recovery, meaning things like operational failures and natural disasters. However, in the age of cybercrime, this is simply not enough. It's important to have secure backup, and backups are often your last line of defense. Now, cybersecurity traditionally has focused on infrastructure security around prevention and detection in your production systems. And despite significant investments in infrastructure security and prevention tools, the risk of a breach can only be reduced. It can't be completely eliminated. Attackers, as everybody knows, are still managing to penetrate defenses and get at your data. So just as important as reducing the likelihood of a successful attack is reducing the impact of an attack. How quickly can business as usual be restored if an attack were to happen? And how can you, as a potential victim, make informed decisions to enable a successful recovery? And I'll explain why backups play a really important role. The typical security stack is necessary but not sufficient because attackers are still managing to deny victims their own data. We can think of ransomware and other types of cyber attacks as denial of data attacks. I want to set the stage with a little bit of research from Rubrik Zero Labs, our threat research unit. We commission market research, use third-party information, and also telemetry from Rubrik customers. And last year, 93% of organizations surveyed reported malicious actors attempting to impact their data backups. And 73% of those efforts were at least partially successful. Now, this is a broad survey. It's not Rubrik customers, but this goes to show that backups are something that both IT and security teams should have an interest in. Now, is your data an easy target? As I said before, traditional backup architectures were designed for disaster recovery and not so much for malicious cyber attacks. And it's important for us to ask ourselves questions like, are 100% of our backups immutable? Is the backup infrastructure physically isolated from the environment that it's protecting? And are multi-factor authentication and retention lock properly enforced? If not, your backups can get tampered with and you might not have anything to recover. You might be forced to consider having to pay a ransom. And with IT environments becoming more complex, distributed, hybrid cloud and multi-cloud, a similar set of considerations also applies to your cloud data. So backup is not cyber recovery, and disaster recovery is not cyber recovery in today's day and age. And when impacted by a cyber attack, organizations have to answer questions like, what exactly do I recover? Was sensitive data in scope? What is a safe restore point? And how do I ensure that I don't restore the malware? You need answers to those questions fast so that you can respond quickly and confidently. And executives and boards are also seeking answers to questions around cyber recovery, such as, are we good? Can you prove it? And how long will it take? So your data protection and data security platform has a major role to play in answering those kinds of questions. So let's spend a moment talking about some considerations around recoverability. So in order to meet business continuity objectives, backups need to be configured with the right policies for each data object, namely how often you're taking backup snapshots and how long data is retained. When an incident occurs, you need to determine what systems were impacted and the last known clean snapshot, easier said than done, and restore it to get back to business as usual. And so the red part here is all downtime. And recoverability is described by two key metrics, recovery point objective and recovery time objective, RPO and RTO. RPO is the point that you can recover from. RTO is the time it takes to recover. RPO is largely dictated by the frequency at which backups are happening. And the RTO is actually largely dictated by physics. There is some influencing that can be done here architecturally, but RPO is the easier knob to turn. At the end of the day, if the frequency of backup snapshots is too infrequent and the physics are not optimized, that can result in lost data and productivity. And when I say data loss here, it's not exactly the same as data loss in the DLP context, but it's still losing your own data nonetheless. Now, why does backup matter? So there are benefits to tackling data protection and data security on the same platform. The first big one being there's a large surface area of data in your backups. Most organizations are backing up many different types of objects, including Windows and Linux file systems, NAS shares, databases, VMs, etc. Security tools like EDRs and antivirus software aren't always deployed on all of those objects. They're not always monitoring and listening on all of your critical infrastructure and critical data objects. So there is a lot of intelligence that can be gathered by analyzing those immutable backups across time. And I'll get a little bit more into that. And this can all be done via a fully hosted and integrated platform. And Rubrik Security Cloud is a SaaS offering. So you can remove silos with a single platform for data protection, data threat analytics, data security posture, and cyber recovery. And you can take advantage of the latest innovations delivered automatically to you. So the question really is, what if you could leverage your existing backup data to investigate threats and recover with greater speed and confidence? Because everybody has backups already, right? So your own backup data can actually be a rich source of intelligence to improve your cyber resilience. Now, some of the questions that I posed earlier can be addressed with data threat analytics. And data threat analytics refers to the ability to continuously monitor your data for risks and detect cyber threats. So if you're taking regular backup snapshots, you're in a good position to recruit your data in the fight against ransomware and other types of cyber incidents. And that's because you're capturing the longitudinal time series history of data if you're protecting your data with Rubrik. And additionally, Rubrik manages metadata, including its content, users, and access privileges to shed light on your data security posture. And so by scanning hundreds of snapshots, Rubrik's data threat analytics engine generates signals that are fed into a highly trained machine learning model. And that builds a historical baseline against which new data can be compared to find anomalous modifications, deletions, and encryptions. And again, we're capturing time series data from enterprise, cloud, and SaaS environments, feeding that data into the data threat engine, and that can result in valuable security intelligence, shining a light on those blind spots so that you can make informed recovery decisions and even get automated remediation recommendations. So what can you do with data threat analytics? You can detect threats early by automatically identifying indicators of compromise within backups using an up-to-date feed of threat intelligence. You can determine the scope of ransomware attacks using machine learning to detect deletions, modifications, and encryptions. And you can determine the initial point, scope, and time of infection by identifying specific indicators of compromise within the time series history of backup data. And because all of this scanning is done on backups, there's no impact to your production systems. So let's take a look at each of those three services within data threat analytics, starting with threat monitoring. So the way this works is that threat intelligence is fed into the Rubrik threat feed. The hashes and Yara rules themselves can come from different contributors. One of the contributors is Rubrik's own InfoSec team. So you can leverage the same intelligence that we're protecting Rubrik the business with. Intelligence also comes from Zero Labs, Rubrik's threat research team, and it can also come from third parties. Either way, we vet the intelligence prior to including it in the feed to ensure the quality of the intelligence is high and that the threats are relevant to critical infrastructure environments. The intelligence gets downloaded at set time intervals, and when there's new intelligence available, a hunt gets kicked off automatically and searches for threats based off of those hashes and Yara rules. And should a match occur, you'll be notified right away by email. You can then drill down via the dashboard to see where the threat was located, what hash or Yara was matched, and find attributes associated with that hash or Yara for more background information to assist in potentially kicking off other threat hunts via Rubrik's threat hunting service or via third-party tools like a SIEM or an EDR. You can also quarantine the threat within your backup from within threat monitoring as well. So essentially, this threat monitoring service is a turnkey solution to help detect and protect your organization from threats. The intelligence gets downloaded automatically. It hunts based off of this intelligence automatically. And if any threats are found, you'll be notified about the threat, and any attributes associated with that threat will be shared whenever possible. It really is that simple. This is literally set it and forget it. The next data threat analytics service that I want to talk about is anomaly detection. Now, this service provides a comprehensive approach to ransomware remediation. We use multi-stage machine learning to detect anomalies in your backup data. The stages include observing file creations, deletions, and modifications, and comparing it to historical changes within that specific workload. Now, in addition to that, entropy is also analyzed to determine if a ransomware-like encryption has happened. And if possible, we'll also identify the specific ransomware strain as well. Now, if an attack has occurred, Rubrik automates the assessment of the blast radius to quickly understand what applications and files were impacted and when. That eliminates the intensive manual labor that's often required, such as bringing up a VM copy and manually comparing and scrubbing for changes. And finally, your backup file system has immutability. So since your data is never available in read-write mode, it simply can't be changed or overwritten. Fast and flexible recovery options can be used to revert back to the most recent clean version, whether using instant recovery, live mount, file level recovery, or orchestrated recovery. And that brings me to threat hunting. And now this is a powerful tool that lets you perform custom scans within your backups on demand for specific indicators of compromise. You can identify the point of malware entry so that you know what point in time to recover to avoid reinfection and minimize data loss. Threat hunting is both broad and deep. It allows you to scan multiple workloads and across time. Threat hunting is flexible. It can consume and search for threats via YARA rules, file hashes, and file patterns. These types of threat intelligence are industry standards. Thus, this allows you to leverage threat intelligence from various sources, such as internal sources like your own InfoSec team, third-party intelligence services that could be paid or open source, from industry groups such as ISACs, and even government agencies who issue threat bulletins. Now, much like anomaly detection, threat hunts are done on backups, and thus there's no impact on live production systems. Threat actors remain unaware of the ongoing hunt. And lastly, since Rubrik backups are immutable, you can identify indicators of compromise that attackers have erased from production systems in an attempt to cover their tracks. So threat hunting can shortcut the hunt for the point in time and the place where adversaries may have gained access to your infrastructure, and help to define the clean recovery point so that you're not recovering with the malware still in place. Let's look at a typical ransomware attack and how data threat analytics fits in. Bad actors will establish initial access, followed by a lateral move, persistence, privilege escalation, recon, collecting, and staging. And finally, there's exfiltration and encryption. So anomaly detection pinpoints the impact on the target. You can identify the blast radius so that you know what to recover quickly. Threat monitoring and threat hunting identify when the attackers established access so that you can ensure a safe restore point. So threat monitoring is a passive activity, while threat hunting is more active if there are specific indicators of compromise that you want to hunt for. Now, these are all very powerful when used in conjunction and help you to make sure that your recovery is as fast and safe as possible. So data threat analytics, again, to recap, combines three powerful threat detection engines. With threat monitoring, you can continuously scan for known threats to detect compromise before the damage is done. With anomaly detection, you can detect file system anomalies and even VM anomalies to identify data destruction and the blast radius of an attack. And with threat hunting, incident responders can hunt for IOCs throughout the time series of data. So let's move on to data security posture. So what can you do with data security posture? You can reduce sensitive data exposure and manage exfiltration risk by discovering what types of sensitive data you have and where it lives. And you can also reduce this data exposure risk by identifying who has access to that sensitive data. Again, just like with data threat analytics, because all of this scanning is done on backups, there isn't impact to your production systems. So let's take a look at the services that make up data security posture, starting with sensitive data monitoring. Now, this service automatically discovers and classifies sensitive data, both on premises and in the cloud, including in Microsoft 365. We offer many pre-built analyzers that are aligned to common policies. So for example, analyzers that'll discover PII, PHI, GDPR data, etc. And sensitive data monitoring offers benefits both in peacetime and in an attack scenario. So In the proactive use case, you can determine, is data stored in the right places? It's very common for organizations to discover that they have sensitive data somewhere where they didn't expect it to be. And also, are we complying properly with data regulations? Now, in the reactive use case, in the attack scenario, this is also useful for regulatory compliance and reporting. You can find out whether sensitive data may have been impacted in an attack and notify the appropriate parties. Now, user access helps you reduce the risk of sensitive data exposure by providing intelligent insights into data access permissions. So you can proactively identify which users have access to what data and what type of risk that access poses. This comes in handy when conducting forensic investigations post-incident, since you'll be able to quickly identify which users had access to the impacted data and therefore narrow down the list of potentially compromised credentials. So again, my goal here was to give you all a peek into why your backup system is a key component of cyber resilience, and just a few takeaways here. Backups are often the last line of defense against cyber attacks, and it's really, really important for your backups to be air-gapped and immutable so that they can't be impacted by those bad actors. Backup policies impact recoverability. It's important to prioritize your data assets. Every type of data object is different, and define RPOs and RTOs. Backups contain really valuable security intelligence. For example, the blast radius of an attack, indicators of compromise, a clean restore point, content sensitivity and access permissions, even remediation recommendations. Again, your backups are your own data, and we should be leveraging this data to get the security intelligence that'll help us get back to business as usual as quick as possible. And lastly, both IT and security should have a seat at the table. And I would encourage everyone to involve IT in your tabletops, because there's a lot of information, like I've been saying, within the backups that those teams can provide. Rubrik Security Cloud is composed of a set of capabilities around data protection, data threat analytics, data security posture, and cyber recovery. And I spent a good chunk of time in this presentation talking through the detect and identify pieces here. But there's a lot more that I barely touched on, including orchestrated recovery and different integrations that we have with other security solutions like DLP, SIEM, and SOAR systems. That's everything that I have for you today. I hope that this session was useful. If you'd like to learn more about Rubrik and our product offerings, please get in touch. If you're curious about the state of data security and want to read more of our research, do check out our Hard Truths report at rubrik.com/0-labs. If you'd like to see the product in action, head over to rubrik.com/explore. Once again, thank you for joining me today. Take care.
And thank you, Veer. I love finding out how to break down those silos and make our data more secure. What is more important than that as we get into 2024? So, time for our final poll question of the event, and it should look familiar to you by now. Let us know what additional resources you'd like to see from Rubrik. And note that Rubrik is unfortunately unable to take questions today, but they will follow up on your great questions that you're asking. I also want to remind everyone about the handouts. We do have a link from Rubrik to its 0 Labs, which Veer was talking about earlier. So we have that handout along with the other two, and these are your final few moments to get those handouts. So I encourage you to go over there now and download those handouts while supplies last, which will only be another couple of minutes before we're done here today. Thanks for your feedback on the poll question here. Very much appreciated. And with that, let's go to the last couple of bits of business here. I now get to give away the final prize drawing of the event. The third of our $300 gift cards is ready to go. And the winner of this one is Josh Aber from Arizona. I think I saw you in the comments earlier, Josh. So congratulations to you, and sit tight. We will be reaching out to you very soon. Okay, if you enjoyed my first event of the year, you should know that we have openings for your company and your company's product or products in 2024. We've got some open slots and would love to hear from you to help you determine which of our hundreds of events each year would be a good fit for you, or perhaps even a custom event. We're very good at doing those as well and just focusing on you and your offerings. So contact us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and you will be hearing back from us almost immediately on something like that. And if you found value in the security event today, I got a lot out of it. You should definitely check out one that we've got going on tomorrow on a topic that I truly believe is undercovered in the industry. This is about API security, and tomorrow, January 18th, will feature that topic. It starts at noon Eastern time, which is 9 a.m. Pacific time. If it looks intriguing, and I sure hope it does, sign up today and get ready to be informed tomorrow. API security. I mean, that stuff is hard, and it's super, super important with everything that's going on, as we've touched on today as well. So check that out tomorrow, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Sign up and get in on that as well. And with that, everyone, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations. I want to thank all of our participants for making this event possible, and that includes Zscaler, Okta, and Rubrik. Finally, last but not least, never least, I want to thank all of you attendees for being here, for being on with me for my first event of 2024. It's always a delight to be here with you, and thanks for spending part of your day with me. I hope you'll join me for many of these events in the coming months. Looking forward to the rest of this year. We've got some great stuff coming up, and I can't wait to see it in future events. So try to stay warm, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.